Nigeria is a very cruel place to live right now, and I'm unapologetic about this. Nigeria, on any given day, depending on the state you live, can be a very dangerous place to live. I'm convinced that the people who still live in Nigeria, specifically those living in the Plateau and Benue State, really love their homes and wants to protect their heritage, and that's why they stay behind. Because it doesn't make sense to me anymore how the people can be so wicked towards one another, and how the government is sitting aloof at these tragic occurrences, ladies and gentlemen, pretending to act. It looks as though tragedy is normalized by the Nigerian government at this point. What is the value of human life in Nigeria, and what is the role of the government of the day? How do you lock up people in their homes and marketplaces and set them on fire and still have the conscience to say you are part of a country? How does these perpetrators get away with it all the time? What can motivate a group of people to go on an attack without provocation and end the lives of many innocent farmers? Ladies and gentlemen, it's confusing. The whole of the country, Nigeria, is a crime scene. Just a few days ago, between June 13th and 14th, more than 150 people were killed in a brutal attack in Yelewata in Benue State in Nigeria. This attack was orchestrated by Fulani herders on the local farmers. The Fulani herdsmen went to their homes and market centers in the night, locked them up, and set them on fire. The victims got burnt beyond recognition, ladies and gentlemen. This violence is a long-standing one over land and water, and raveled in ethnic and religious dispositions. The Fulanis executed the people on their own judgment and fled with no fear of repercussions. The president of Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, President Tinubu, described the attack as senseless bloodletting and pledged to take decisive action. And I wish, ladies and gentlemen, I understood what decisive action meant by this president. This year alone, from April, multiple death attacks have already occurred, taking more than 20 lives at a time. So I honestly would like to understand what decisive action means by President Bola Tinubu. It's been 4 days gone already since the incident happened, and the only information we have at this point is that the federal and state government deploying troops to that place and conducting investigations. Ladies and gentlemen, investigations which normally end up in nothing. We would like to know the details of the investigations and the actions taken by the government to bring justice to the deceased and their families. Many are at this point left homeless and devastated in their own homeland. But there is a bigger picture, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring to your attention. Let me give you these facts about attacks and deaths in Nigeria since President Tinubu became president. Please listen to this. President Tinubu was sworn in as Nigeria's 16th president on May 29th, 2023. In his first 45 days, that is from May 29th to July 13th, 2023, there were over 600 killings by non-state actors, which involved bandits, insurgents, and militias. 600 men and women and children were murdered in the first 45 days of his office. Then by December of 2023, 5,135 deaths were recorded. From April of this year, in Plateau State, Borno, and Zamfara State, altogether combined for 10,217 deaths from gunmen attacks in Tinubu's first 2 years in office, according to Amnesty International. It appears as though these bandits were waiting for his presidency to activate the attacks. This is because from 2019 to 2023, under the previous president, Buhari, the total number of deaths in such attacks were about 2,601. But for few months after he was sworn in as president, the death toll took on a spike. Why is this so, ladies and gentlemen? Does Nigerians living in certain states lives matter? Like all of them. All over the northern and central part of Nigeria, there is growing concern and pressure to enforce the laws that prohibit open grazing, but nothing is being done about it. There is an urgent need for the creation of grazing reserves and expansion of ranches in northern Nigeria, and nothing is being done about it. Ladies and gentlemen, The Fulani herdsmen move their cattle to people's farms and graze on people's crops at will, and nothing happens. Ladies and gentlemen, there are reports of killings happening every day in Nigeria on these incidents, and nothing is done about it. Ladies and gentlemen, these Fulani herdsmen are armed to the teeth. They threaten, kill, rape, and kidnap at will, and nothing is done about it. They have no grazing reserves of their own. They are not interested in changing their ways of keeping animals, apart from the open grazing method they've done since inception, and they are not willing to change, ladies and gentlemen. They therefore continue to move from place to place every day in search of new grazing lands. And when the dry season is in and they cannot find grass, fresh grass for their animals, they move their animals into people's farms and destroy them. This is the reality on the ground. They made similar moves in Ghana and had to be dealt with in the harshest way by the local people and the police to deter them. Ladies and gentlemen, what has the Nigerian police been up to all this while? And surprisingly, this is not an isolated case. When you go to Mali, in the regions of Mopti and central Mali, violence between Fulani herdsmen and Dogon Dambara farmers are very common. In the north and eastern regions of Burkina Faso, similar incidents are always recorded. In the far north and northwest regions of Cameroon, Fulani herdsmen are accused of militia attacks. Same in Ivory Coast and in Senegal. This has become a West African plague, ladies and gentlemen. How do we permanently deal with this? How do we end this? Ladies and gentlemen, if this bothers you, let us hear from you in the comment section. It is estimated that the total population of Fulanis are between 20 to 25 million across West and Central Africa, with an illiteracy rate of between 73% to 86% among their women and men. They have one of the highest fertility rates in the whole world. In Nigeria, the average Fulani woman has 8 children. Ladies and gentlemen, their population is constantly rising because of the age at which they begin to give birth. By age 20, the average Fulani girl has at least 3 children with very minimal plans of getting an education and living a different lifestyle from the nomadic. This is their condition. And at 8% only of Nigeria's current population, these are the challenges Nigeria has to deal with. So then what happens, ladies and gentlemen? What then will be the situation in Nigeria when their population increases from 8% to 20%? Ladies and gentlemen, there must be a deliberate government policy to get them interested in other things apart from keeping animals in the nomadic sense. That is the problem. And to receive the type of education that can assimilate them into civil society. The world has evolved. Things have changed. They cannot continue moving freely from one grazing site to the other. This cannot continue. It is not sustainable. It cannot be allowed and continue, whether in Nigeria, Mali, Ghana, Ivory Coast, or Senegal. This must stop. The killings in Nigeria are already too many. If the government doesn't quickly come up with a workable plan in the foreseeable future and to put an end to this, the people will have no options than to protect themselves at all costs or to retaliate whenever there is an attack. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the realities. And the people cannot vacate their homes for any reason, including threats. Nigeria's internal security is simply broken. It is obvious the ruling government cannot be the one to correct it. The current regime is seen by many as compromised. They are compromised to the highest level. No matter the level of aid or financial assistance provided them, they are unable to bring this to an end. Some believe it is because the very government is in support of the Fulanis. There must be a change, ladies and gentlemen. In Nigeria, crisis in Nigeria has become a regional crisis. And that's why people like myself and many others are speaking about these happenings. We are worried for the people who live in the states where these things happen. And we are also worried for whenever there is a spillover into our own countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we must be worried and we must demand accountability. Our condolences go out to all those who have lost families and homes and their sources of livelihoods at this point. We will be your original voice when your government turns a blind eye on your circumstances. Something must drastically change in Nigeria sooner than later. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, for change to happen in Nigeria. Thanks for taking time to watch this video, and share this video to as many Nigerians as possible. And remember to subscribe. I'll come your way again with another one very soon. Until then, may peace reign in Nigeria. It is bye-bye for now.